why fund managers can't beat the S&P 500? Because they're sheep, and sheep get slaughtered.
The numbers told the story, they always do.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Because all we care about is getting fucking rich.
You connect points I don't even know to look for.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information.
Public's out there throwing darts at a board sport. I don't throw darts at a board. I bet on sure things.
Welcome, Karma Clan. Week 2 in the NFL is in the books. Welcome to the Sports Trading Desk. I'm your co-host, Brett Matthew, along with Zach James and Corey Larson, the trio of Sportfolio strategists. Let's dive right into it. What are some of the kind of key things that we're kind of taking away from this week, or kind of key observations? Let's start with you, Zach.
Yeah, I think the biggest one, I think it's probably for most people, is going to be injuries. As we saw, Saquon Barkley is probably done for the season. Bosa for the 49ers. There's injuries across the board. Malik Hooker for the Colts. So, as it pertains to these injuries, the ones that aren't season-ending, and even the ones that are season-ending, I think it's important to just keep in mind, when this is really going to affect teams versus when it's, they'll move past that injury, or how long it'll take to move past that injury. So, like, for instance, a game that we started high on, we'll get to later, but, was the Lions. My hesitancy with that game kind of grew as the week got closer to Sunday because of kind of the cluster injuries, especially in the secondary. And so there's injuries that just seem like you just want to avoid that side in game in a certain matchup just because you just don't know who the second and third string guys are and how they're really going to perform. So just food for thought.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I'm kind of taking away looking at a lot of these scores is, maybe with the exception of maybe 2 games, it looks like the themes for a lot of these teams from week 1 did carry over into week 2. So the Eagles underperformed, Rams outperformed. Same theme from last week. Denver outperformed. Pittsburgh offense did look good. Minnesota looked like trash. Jacksonville outperformed. Atlanta put up a bunch of points again. The Jets looked like crap. Josh Allen and the Bills, again, kind of really are outperforming expectations, at least certainly from an offensive perspective. Miami hung around like they hung around with the Patriots. The Giants hung around like they hung around with the Steelers. But the Bears ultimately got the game done. The Packers scored 40-plus points for the second week in a row. Arizona, again, looked very good from an offensive perspective. Ravens continue to continue to perform the exact same way. Texans underperformed yet again. Really, the only things that kind of didn't carry over was the Chiefs looked quite sluggish. The Chargers looked much better. Their defense looked good versus the Bengals last week, but of course, Justin Herbert sneaking in kind of unexpectedly gave that offense a whole new flavor. And I think that really, that it was a really great energy that spread across the team that really helped them. But really then besides that, the Colts put in, again, they had a good offensive performance last week. They had another good offensive performance, but their defense finally did step up. Now, is it the ineptitude of the Vikings, or is it more the Colts defense? Remains to be seen. We'll have to take a closer look at that one. And then the Cowboys, again, were down like they were down versus the Rams, made a comeback, and instead of getting called for an offensive pass interference that ultimately made them lose last week, they snuck in a wild win this week. So that's kind of like some of my observations. What about you, Corey?
Yeah, I would probably just touch on the continuity again. Looking at the top 10 teams in continuity coming into the season, we saw those teams go 7-2 again this week. So I think that's still going to it's going to fade as the season goes on, but I think it's going to really show itself early on in the season here. I think the other thing that I'd maybe look at is I think mobile quarterbacks are just going to be very valuable to start this season as, again, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, both with I think 8 rushes for Kyler, maybe 16 for Lamar. I think that is just really wearing down some defensive lines, maybe early on with a shorter preseason, shorter offseason, just a bizarre offseason. And I think that's just it's shining a little stronger right now. I think those offenses are just clicking a little bit more. It's going to take some defenses more time to catch up to those teams that run offenses like that.
Yeah, good point. So let's go in and start grading kind of like our handicapping performance for week 2. So I'll kick off, walk through just quickly our NFL core sportfolio performance. So our top 5 picks, again, our core sportfolio is our 5 highest conviction plays. We keep the risk to a minimum, allocating approximately 1% to each position. And we benchmark our performance versus the top 5 consensus plays of the Super Contest. And again, our broader competitors across the landscape and vis-a-vis their Super Contest plays. So our top 5 picks were the Falcons +4, Giants +4.5. We actually sold a point there. Sold it from 5.5 down to 4.5 to get it at +100. Didn't hurt us there, so that helped us a little bit. Eagles -2.5. We sold another point there to get, reduce the juice, move it to +105. Again, didn't hurt us there because did not come into play. Dolphins +6, Lions +7. So we go 3-2. So we're up approximately 1%, up approximately 2% now on the season. We're essentially keeping pace with the Super Contest top 5 consensus plays. They went 3-2 last week, 3-2 this week. So there's room for improvement, but given it's such a wild 2020 season and so many, moving pieces, so many unknown variables at play here, to start the season off 3-2 and 3-2, I'll definitely take that. We're cashing tickets. We're moving forward. We're positive P&L, and that also has moved downstream into our aggressive portfolio. So again, starting off the season, core portfolio, we're now up approximately 2%. So I'll pat ourselves on the back on that. Now, there's definitely room for improvement here. No doubt about it. Colts was a high conviction play that we liked, and we played across our different contests. We had exposure in aggressive, and we didn't have it in core, which we probably should have. And maybe we sneak in a 4-1 there, but alas, we didn't. I think, our biggest miss of the week was really having Eagles exposure kind of across all of our contests and reports and things like that. And it was a game that we kind of all agreed on with one another and didn't litigate to the extent that we should have. I think it was like, I like the Eagles, Zach, you like the Eagles, Corey, you like the Eagles. Some other people that we consulted, they also like the Eagles. All right, move on. What's our next pick? And, we really just got to do a better job of making sure that we try to see all these games from all the different angles. And, hey, sometimes, we all are going to agree on the play. And I think for the most part, that is going to be a net benefit. But the thing is I would feel better about losing Eagles is if we had checked all those boxes and still came to the conclusion that, yes, let's lever up on Eagles because that's how we feel so strongly about it. The thing is we didn't do that in this instance. And I think we just need to make sure that, we continue to do that type of thing, because I know, at least, Zach and I, we went back and forth on the Giants, in or out, in or out, in or out, Dolphins, in or out, in or out, in or out, and even Lions to an extent. Like, I'm fine with losing that Lions one because we came up with all these different angles and we knew how we were going to lose it. We knew what we were going into. We knew they were going to be weak in the secondary. We knew that they had cluster injuries. We knew they were going to be on the road. We knew the Packers had a great week 1 and that could carry over into week 2. Nonetheless, we still liked it. So I'm fine with that. The thing is we didn't come up with all those different multivariate scenarios for the Eagles. So I just feel like it was a lazy handicap. It was something I feel like we did in week 1, 2 by having Colts -8 in there. Again, it was one, Zach and I, we like it, pat each other on the back, let's move on. And I think we just need to make sure that we don't do that moving forward. That's one of my key takeaways at least from our handicapping perspective. So Corey, how was your report and how would you grade your overall handicapping this week?
Yeah, so my against the spread report, where I rank all the games from 1 to 15, I had a write up on the top 6 games, and if you just take a look at those, I went 3-2 with one game pending tomorrow night on the Las Vegas New Orleans matchup. Overall, very similar to you guys. I think getting in early on Atlanta was a very positive move. But again, Philly was one of my strongest convictions. And it was something where I just never saw the other side of the handicap. So I kind of I assumed that this is the right side. And it just never gave it its fair fight for the Rams. So I think I really missed there. But other than that, it was a good week, another positive week. So we're looking forward to the next week.
How are you, Zach?
Yeah, the Blitz report I released Friday night, Saturday, and it's basically recommendations of what you should play per game, whether it's a total spread, exotic, live bet type thing. And it went 8-4-1 with the pending Sunday night game. And the game of the week, unlike last week, and I was not as confident in the game of the week this week, but I made it Colts. So my main play in that was the Indy money line and then leveraging from there. But because those leverages didn't hit, but the main part of that handicap did, I'm calling it a push. So yeah, 8-4-1 seems okay. And then tonight's I have a live bet for the Patriots, Seattle. So
great.
Seems like that's a good play too.
Yeah, so we're kind of like all net positive, and again, like we're a little bit hard on ourselves because we have such high expectations, so that's why it seems like, at least for me, I feel like I always walk away from every week, unless it's 5-0 clean sweep, every handicap correct, that it's like room for improvement. And, so I feel like, there's plenty of people out there who went 1-4, 2-3, 0-5, 1-8, and their bankrolls got cut in half this week, and we're nowhere near that, and we almost never are near that. So again, like we're all kind of plus P&L here. That's all great and good, but I just think that for everyone listening too, we have higher expectations than that. We want to be able to release 4-1 type plays. We want to be able to really crush the competition, not just modically, just barely outperform the competition. We want to crush it. And that's our goal. So let's dive into now just kind of assessing some of these games. And so, Zach, let's start with you. Is there a specific game that you want to kick off and talk about?
Well, first I want to give what I'm going to call our handicap of the week. And I'm going to give that to Corey. He had a brilliant insight with the Arizona Cardinals at -6.5, -7 even. That when I read his breakdown that he put in his article that you could have, read at your viewing pleasure, I thought it was something that nobody else has brought up, and it really kind of put an emphasis on a team I already leaned, but I wish we would have really pushed even further with the Cardinals. I think it was a sharp insight. Corey, do you remember that insight? Can you give that to the viewing public? Because I don't want to mess it up.
Yeah, so I was kind of just mentioning that because the Cardinals ran at such a fast pace in week 1 and we're planning to run at such a fast pace over the course of the season, that you'd be seeing a lot more snaps in the game. So I kind of laid out a scenario, pretend you have a touchdown favorite, and now you're given 2 options. Option 1 would be 50 snaps in the game, or option 2, 200 snaps in the game. Which would you choose if you want the best opportunity for the touchdown favorite to cover? And without kind of knowing either team's game style, you'd probably choose option 2, the 200 snaps, because the more plays that are ran, the greater opportunity there is for the favored team to create separation, just being more possessions and then just more opportunity to score. So you'll see more separation over the course of the game. So that was kind of my handicap there. And then just in addition to that, we saw what Murray did to San Francisco's defensive line in week 1. He neutralized their greatest strength, and that is definitely Washington's greatest strength as well. And he, again, neutralized it. And, Arizona was able to score quite a few. They ended up finishing with 27 points. But if you watch that game, it was out of reach pretty much from the very get-go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was a great handicap, and this was one of the few games that we had exposure to, across our contests and our aggressive portfolio, et cetera, that you really didn't have to sweat. So the Cardinals jumped out to a 14-0 lead, extended it to 20-0 by halftime, and it was kind of just wasn't a game that you had to sweat. Whereas there was a lot of games this week that you did. Another that was definitely a great handicap, and really goes to show really too that how do we feel about the Cardinals moving forward? So this is a game, this week I'm gonna have to really spend even more time midweek kind of rewatching a lot of the game tape, since I wasn't able to see a lot of these games live this week. But how do we feel about the Cardinals? So they've kind of outperformed expectations 2 weeks in a row now. They've covered both weeks. One where they were a touchdown underdog, another they were a touchdown favorite. So they've covered across a wide variety of scenarios as well. One on the road, one at home. So do we think this is a team that's for real? Do we think that they're going to continue to get like this premium in the market now? Do we think that they're probably going to continue to be bettable? Corey, since I know you were probably one of the biggest bulls on the Cardinals, let's get your take.
Yeah, so I think the market maybe is slowly catching up on them. We'll talk about that more when we dig into their matchup this next week. But I do have my concerns. They haven't really seen a strong offense yet. Their offense has looked good, but they've played the Washington offense. Defensively, they've played the Washington offense as well as the Niners offense. Mm-hmm. And we know the Niners offense doesn't have the pieces it's had. And we know Washington's offense is maybe the worst offense, if not bottom 5 in the entire league. So as much as their offense has looked good, I still question too, as teams get more tape on this team. Yes, they had the same kind of maybe scheme last year, but I mean, as more things get seen with Hopkins and Murray, that's been very strong these first 2 weeks. I expect it to continue, but I wonder how strong it will be going forward. And then we'll have to see how that defense is tested, because that was one of their weaknesses last season as well. So I'm still very bullish on them, but I'm not sure. I think the market might start overreacting here pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to add to that real quick, the issue is our expectations are actually being met. So for us, I don't think there's much to overemphasize or under scrutinize. I think the market may actually take a little longer to even catch up because we were already high on them. And their next 3 games are against some of the worst teams in the NFL. So, I mean, this team very well could go 5-0. So if you're going to sell the Cardinals, I would wait until they're potentially 4-1, 5-0 over the next 3 weeks, because I think you're going to have plenty of time to get that market to overreact to a potentially 5-0 Cardinals team once they really start getting into division play and all those type of things. So. Mm-hmm. I think they play Carolina, the Jets, and another team like Dolphins or something.
Yeah, let's also talk about like maybe our biggest surprises this week, and then we can kind of talk about the associated game. So one of the things that I would say one of my biggest surprises this week was, we saw a lot of market pressure coming in on the Jags. I think the look ahead was plus double digits. And then that line continued to trickle lower. I think it actually ended up closing under a touchdown. So this thing could have moved, 5-6 points over the course of the week. And it was a prescient move, since the Jags cover once again 2 weeks in a row now and played very competitive football. They could have won this game. Now, the defense looked atrocious, but they nonetheless put up 30 points, and this time on the road. Gardner Minshew threw for 3 touchdowns, 340 yards. James Robinson, Fournette's replacement, looks just as competent as Fournette ever was in this offense. And the Titans, we were looking at last week, when we picked the Colts, that the Jags just scored so many points on them and, obviously won the game outright. Like, wow, what is wrong with this Colts defense? How bad is it? But maybe it was more so just how good is the Jags offense? Because, obviously we saw this week the Colts defense, really smothered the Vikings. And, we're very bearish on the Vikings. We we bet them under on the futures wins total. We've bet against them 2 weeks in a row now. We bet the Packers big time last week. We bet the Colts again big time this week. So that's a macro theme that's definitely playing out. But yeah, just to see the Jags just really put in 2 really good performances here, especially coming into the season. So many thought that maybe this team would be akin to the Dolphins last year. So, a team that could be bet on over the course of the season, not that they're going to go 0-16 or that they're going to be the worst team of all time by any means, but that at least in the beginning of the season, especially since the front office has been dismantling the team, they have very questionable coaching, that they would kind of get shell-shocked and rocked the first couple of weeks here. And that has not been the case whatsoever. And it looks like some of the sharpest bettors in the market picked up on that, not just this week, but also last week, because there was pressure on the Jags leading into kickoff versus the Colts as well. And I feel like the Jags is something that, that's a broader macro theme that we have not picked up on. I feel like, this week we didn't ever really flirt with betting the Jags, and maybe we should have. So that's kind of like one of my biggest surprises. How about you guys?
I have one real quick. Part of my assumption, and it's why we leaned KC, which we can, destroy that game if we want. But, Houston and KC were coming off the Thursday game, having extra time, and both more or less kind of laid an egg. And obviously Houston was up against Baltimore, but, they were home. They were only 7-point dogs. Baltimore didn't run away with this game per se. Houston had chances to stay in the game and have opportunities, whereas KC really got dominated from start to finish. And, Patrick Mahomes finds a way to win, some incompetence from Anthony Lynn. So I'm recalibrating on if this extra time in the beginning of the season is actually a net benefit, because maybe teams actually lose the little bit of rhythm that they were getting by having the extra rest. And especially if you think about a preseason, these first 4 weeks, having extra time when you haven't had any time isn't necessarily a benefit other than to heal your body physically. But besides that, you get out of rhythm when you're just getting into rhythm. And that to me maybe is what we may see moving forward. But then again, it's only 2 data points, so it's hard to kind of quantify, but just was not expecting that.
Great point, Zach. And I think that, betting the Chiefs minus 8.5 on the road versus a division opponent, just not a good setup. And, even if they would have pulled it out and covered, it still wouldn't have been, it's just not a good setup. So I think there was other opportunities that, we could have flirted with instead. And, a good thing is that we didn't have a lot of Chiefs exposure, and most of the Chiefs exposure I know that we did have in ag, in our aggressive portfolio, was teased to, minus 2.5 or money line, things like that. So all of those were at least positive contributors, at least on those components of whatever the bet was. But the fact that we even had any exposure to Chiefs in this situation, I feel like is a misfire. And there was definitely better opportunities to be had. And I think that's another thing that we just want to continue to work on moving forward, and being able to make sure that when we kind of finalize a selection, do we feel confident in justifying that selection to our subscribers or our investors per se when it doesn't hit. So if it doesn't hit, do we have a defensible investment thesis to say, well, these are the reasons why we did it. It didn't play out, but so be it, that's going to happen, And I think, there's plenty of bets and allocations that we finalize across our contests and in our portfolios that we do have that for. We have a defensible investment thesis that even if it doesn't play out, we had great reasoning, great rationale, and it just so happened it didn't work out. So be it. But I feel like the Chiefs is, I feel like you could just pull off any dumb schmuck off the side of the corner of the road. He would have bet Chiefs -8.5 and probably gave you the exact same reasons that we did. So if that's the case, you really need to take a step back and say, well, what value add are you really bringing to the table? And do you think you really have edge over the market by betting Chiefs -8.5 on the road versus the Chargers? Now, obviously, the whole Justin Herbert issue and him coming in was a massive curveball, and we certainly handicapped this game with Taylor behind center. But even still, I think I would still be skeptical because the Chargers defense still did play great. I think we just need to make sure that we continue to improve on that respect and just make sure that, all right, these are our final allocations. These are our recommendations to our audience. Do we have defensible thesis if they do not play out to the way we thought they were? So I think that's just one key takeaway from that point. So Corey, what's one of the kind of things that surprised you this week?
For me, I think it would be something kind of over the course of the first 2 weeks. Two teams that I think myself and even you both are very bullish. We're very bullish on. Were the Lions, and then I know Brett, you and I chose the Eagles to win the division. Both these teams, to be fair, have struggled with some cluster injuries. The Lions in their secondary, the Eagles on their line. So they've had those issues. But even past that, I think those teams have underperformed. The Eagles got beat very badly versus the Rams this week. I'll have to go back and watch that, as well as the Lions. Week 1, I mean, we saw the Eagles get upset by Washington. Yeah, the score was maybe a little deceiving, but it was still a game that the Eagles were expected to handle quite easily, as well as the Lions letting the Bears come all the way back and win that. So I think my main takeaway is to not get stubborn with these teams, because you'll see a lot of some of the sharpest handicappers, they can be very stubborn on their take. And I know we were very high on the Lions. I think it's important to not just be stubborn and be like, oh, wow, the Lions are catching this many points. We got to play them because we were so high on them coming into the season. Or the Eagles, in a certain scenario, not laying very many points. So I think with that, it's important to not be stubborn and to try to not get locked into a team over the course of maybe a macro view. It's important to keep that macro view, but I think it's very important to really weigh those injuries that are maybe going on, or really weigh what's actually been, how it's been playing out, and not get stuck in what we want to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and real quick, Corey, to add, I think to your point, your macro thesis is based on variables that are no longer at play when you have a severe amount of injuries, not to mention how the line then affects your view, in that intra-game level. So, to overweight the macro view is really to neglect key variables from week to week. And so just kind of reiterating your point of just kind of putting context to why I agree with you.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally, great points as well. And that's something that we also want to make sure that we keep in mind. And I think a great example of that is a place where that we haven't hit a speed bump yet, but we may, and we want to make sure that we don't feed too much into our different confirmation biases, because we've been very bearish on the Vikings in the preseason, and that's certainly played out over the first 2 weeks. But that isn't to say that if the market gets too down on the Vikings and actually misprices them too much to the downside, that we can't not just avoid the Vikings at all costs. Now, the other thing is we want to make sure that we at least see flashes of positive momentum or positive play that you can say, oh, now there's a substantive, aspect of this team that I've witnessed, that I've seen, or that I've noticed in different, looking at different components of the box score that demonstrate that there is opportunity to bet on this team moving forward that the market is not appreciating. And, I know Zach was getting a little cheeky on Twitter about the Jets on Saturday night and into Sunday morning. I don't know if he was drinking last night and it carried over into this morning with some mimosas.
Sober.
But I think one of the things is what we really want to really recognize is, injuries are super important. And, we just want to make sure that we continue to take those things into consideration, especially in a season like this. And if there is a massive amount of injuries, does the team then have the culture and coaching that can compensate for those devastating injuries? Now, the Lions have devastating cluster injuries that actually weakens their overall profile, and they do not have the culture or continuity to compensate for that. And that was something that we probably should have waited a little bit more so. And then same thing with the Jets. Now, we didn't really have any Jets exposure. Maybe we had some small Jets exposure in aggressive, but nothing too damaging. But the same thing with the Jets is devastating injuries. And they do not have the coaching or continuity to compensate for it. The Niners, on the other hand, also have devastating injuries, but do have coaching and culture, which allows them to compensate for it. And so I just think, those are the types of things that we should make sure that we continue to take into consideration moving forward when, assessing different matchups and things of that sort. So let's move on now to week 3 and start to digest what that looks like and give just our listeners just some of our kind of initial thoughts and leanings on some of these matchups. So Zach, have you looked at week 3s yet?
I have.
Jesus, you guys. Okay, well, let's just. So Corey, do you have week 3's lines and matchups up in front of you?
Yep, I do.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. I'll guess them again since I have not looked at week 3's. And we can kind of go through these rather quickly. And just kind of give our initial thoughts here. So let's kick it off.
Yeah, so we'll start with the Thursday night game, Miami Dolphins at Jacksonville Jaguars.
So I like what I've seen from Miami. That's one of the reasons why we bet on them this week. I feel like Miami could have actually beaten the Bills outright. So Preston Williams dropped a touchdown in the end zone on 4th down. So that could have been a wild swing. In fact, early on in the 4th, the Dolphins were winning the game. But Stephon Diggs made some amazing catches on some questionable throws by Josh Allen that just happened to work out for them. So the Bills aren't playing better than I expected, but the Dolphins are playing decent football. Obviously, so are the Jags. So I'll say Miami -3.
Wrong side, Jacksonville -3, actually.
On the road?
No, it's at Jacksonville.
Oh, it's at Jacksonville. Okay. So yeah, I would have said Jacksonville -3. Gotcha. Okay, I was thinking it was in Miami. So yeah, I mean, on Thursday night too, definitely a stay away game for me. What about you guys?
Yeah, I don't see much value either side. I think it's still too early to know what the Jags really are because obviously that defense I think is not very good. Mm-hmm. They had to sell out to stop Derrick Henry, and then Tannehill just ate them alive. Yeah. Dolphins, I expected a bounce back performance by Fitzpatrick last week. So on a short week, they're not going far. They're going 8 hours car ride north to Jacksonville. So it actually is not really a true road game. I don't think so.
Although the Jags will have some fans, I believe.
Yeah, I mean about the normal amount of fans they would have otherwise. So
yeah, true.
I mean, I think this is you have to take the points if you're gonna take a side.
Yeah, I probably never thought you'd see the Jags at preseason. If you were to ask me, Jags are going to be a favorite in week 3 versus anybody.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Corey?
Yeah, I'll have to agree with Zach on this. I would have to take Miami in the points as well. I think Miami actually has put up two pretty good games so far. I mean, playing the Patriots and Bills, I mean, those are two pretty solid defenses, and two pretty solid teams overall, both teams vying for the playoffs. And honestly, Miami played the Patriots pretty close, as well as the Bills. Like you said, they could have maybe even won that game. So I think as much as people are surprised by what Jacksonville's done so far this year, I think Miami's probably overperformed maybe just as much, probably not as much as Jacksonville, but to be catching 3 points in this case, I just think it's a little bit of an overreaction to maybe what Jacksonville's done these first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I agree. I think Miami's flying a little bit under the radar. Next.
We got the Las Vegas Raiders at the New England Patriots.
Ooh, I'll say Patriots minus a touchdown.
So we're taping this right now during the Patriots game, but the Patriots were favored by 5.5 yesterday.
Gotcha. Yeah, so Patriots, still have to finish this game. They're currently beating Seattle by 3 in the third. And then, the Raiders still have to play tomorrow. I think if the Raiders get crushed by the Saints, which I don't expect that they will, they obviously could. And too, just my personal view on that game tomorrow is just like either Saints cover or Raiders win straight up. So I can see this. If New England wins this game tonight and the Raiders don't put in a good performance, I could see that moving up to a touchdown. But no other actionable views on my side.
Yeah, nothing for me. I think need to see how the Raiders perform. But the Raiders, they really just don't have very much going on defense. So it's a really tall order to, I think, off a Monday night presumable upset victory, having to take out the Patriots. I think it's too tall of an order personally. So to me, it would be Patriots or bust.
Yeah, for me as well, I'd lean towards the Patriots. We got a little time zone effect here with Las Vegas traveling to the Patriots. So it's going to be 2 hours earlier than normal, I think, for Las Vegas. But even on top of that, I think New England just matches up pretty well with the Raiders, just with their defense. I think Carr struggles with defenses that maybe don't just let up the easy stuff underneath, and that's not what New England's defense does. So I would definitely lean towards the Patriots here.
Good stuff.
Next game, we're looking at the Los Angeles Rams at the Buffalo Bills.
So 2-2-0 teams, two teams that are likely being upgraded by the market. I'll say Bills minus 3.5.
Very close. Bills minus 2.5.
Ooh, interesting. So shaded below 3 instead of above 3. I really like what I've seen from the Bills. I feel like I've seen improvement from Josh Allen. He still makes a couple bonehead plays, and those aren't necessarily, curtailing the outcome of the game for them. So I think that is flying a little bit under the radar. But he has also looked like he has demonstrably improved as a passer. And I'm sure having Stephon Diggs has helped that as well and makes him look even better than he was last year. But of course, the Rams, I can't imagine really anybody being upgraded more than the Rams across the league so far, I feel like, from most handicappers. So this is going to be an interesting one for sure. And on the road, going across the country, I would probably, at 2.5, I'd probably have to lean Bills.
Yeah. Right now, I think for me, I don't know if the Rams are going across country. I think they're staying because they went to Philly this week. So they might be staying on the East Coast. Should double check that before we place that.
I guarantee you, they got to staying.
Yeah, they've requested a road trip for this, so they are for sure staying.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that doesn't hurt the Rams too bad. And it keeps kind of the team from getting too high, because after a win, when you go back home, kind of like the Bills are doing, you see your family, they celebrate you, you're so great, all that shit. Well, that's not really going to happen with the Rams. They're sticking together. So I don't think it's going to be a flat spot for the Rams, even if the market is a little higher on them. And The thing is if the Bills still have their two starting linebackers out, Gesicki had like 140 yards and a touchdown, the tight end for Miami on the Bills, something I predicted for my DFS, which did well. But for Rams, I mean, Higbee had 3 touchdowns versus the Eagles, and the Rams love, crossing routes, just kind of spreading out the field and opening up the middle. So I'm concerned that this is a Rams strength versus what could be a Bills weakness. And if that's the case, with not only being able to get pressure on Allen, who's not a very accurate passer anyways, Ramsey taking out Diggs, it really seems like this plays right into the Rams' kind of strengths. So I would have to lean the Rams at this point.
Yeah, you make some good points.
Yeah, I'm not too sure I can really have a strong lean on this game. I think I'll really have to watch the week 2 performances from both these teams. I think I still haven't totally grasped, maybe how good the Rams are, or if it's more so just a schematic matchup so far these first 2 weeks. So I'll really have to gauge that because, the Bills definitely do have a top 3 probably defense in the league. So it could be something that could slow this offense. And if the offense isn't clicking quite as well, we could have a whole different ball game for the Rams.
For sure.
Next matchup, we got the Houston Texans at the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Texans own 2, Pittsburgh 2-0. I'll say Pittsburgh minus 6. Minus 6.
Pittsburgh minus 5.
Gotcha. Pittsburgh's got some real problems on the offensive line. I'd probably lean Texans very slightly at this point in time. But yeah, not very strong. How about you guys?
What do you think, Corey?
Yeah, I'd lean towards the Texans as well. I again have to watch week 2 for this game. I didn't catch any of the Pittsburgh game or the Houston game, but I'm still maybe not completely going to sell myself on Big Ben being back to his same self. And I still think that's kind of being priced into this line a little bit. I see it just from the score. Denver played them pretty close. And I know Denver had quite a few injuries. It just wasn't a good spot for Denver playing at Pittsburgh on the short week, coming out of Denver early on in the season, off this bizarre offseason. So I really didn't like that spot for Denver, and Pittsburgh didn't really impress me, at least from the score. So I'll really be interested to see that. So right now it'd be a slight lean to Houston.
Yeah, and just to add, I think this handicap of this game is going to come down to if you think Deshaun Watson being able to kind of maneuver and run is a net benefit compared to the Steelers, who they played the last 2 weeks. They had 7 sacks in the game versus the Broncos. So if you think Watson's legs will kind of neutralize that front, kind of like Murray's been doing to teams with strong fronts, that to me is when you could play Houston. But, Brett has a good take on Watson. Is we're not sure how good he really is in that his inconsistency kind of shows him to be kind of, and I know he's a product of his system and Bill O'Brien too, but he's really good late in games when the game's on the line, the team's close. But, there's a lot left to be desired throughout games and just a lot of sloppiness and just missed, plays, holding onto the ball too long. So, we're still kind of not sold that Watson is, the Robin to Pat Mahomes' Batman, so to speak.
For sure. Yeah, I think Watson, he makes great plays and gets a lot of media attention, and when they do win, he can put on like these flashy plays, and he's definitely a good quarterback. But he's not like, I don't even think he's even close to being in a league with Patrick Mahomes, etc. Whereas Mahomes can literally take a bad performance by his team, put his team on his back, and almost unilaterally will his team forward. And bring them back and win games for them, like they did even this week versus the Chargers. And I feel like for Watson and Houston, like a lot of times Watson can actually compound the mistakes and make them even worse. He's well known to hold on to the ball like as one of the longest, as most quarterbacks do, and a lot of his offensive line gets blamed for the amount of sacks that he takes when it's really a byproduct of himself and the way he plays the game. But nonetheless, 6 points or 5 points, whatever it is a lot, especially given the offensive line injuries to the Steelers. I think that's like one of the biggest takeaways from this matchup, at least as of this point.
Great points, Brett. So we'll take a look at the next game, and we've seen some movement in this game due to injury, but we're looking at the San Francisco 49ers at the New York Giants.
If again, we'll have to keep looking at the injuries and stuff, but if the Niners are as injured as they were this week versus the Giants, this has got to be close. I say Niners minus 1.5.
It's actually Niners minus 4. And the look ahead on this before the games were played on Sunday was Niners minus 6.5.
So it has come down. This is the thing, what I think about the Niners, and this is one thing I was texting with Zach, was even if Jimmy G went out, like Nick Mullins, I thought was a good, one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league. And then even when Mostert went out, that the Niners have like 3 starting running backs in the backfield behind him in, McKinnon, Jeff Wilson, Kevin Coleman. Like, I feel like all those teams can be taking, 15 carries for basically any team. So I don't think there's that big of a drop off. The Giants got kind of pushed around by the Bears over the course of the first half, but stiffened in the second half. And again, kind of came down to like, we knew that if the Giants weren't going to cover this week, or we thought they could win the game, but if they didn't win the game and if they didn't cover, that it was going to be because of Danny Dimes turnovers. And that was the reason why they ultimately didn't win the game. I feel like they still could have won the game, but I think that was more so being bearish on the Bears, not necessarily super bullish on the Giants. So I suspect, the Niners will also be staying on the East Coast, having just played the Jets. It's going to be an interesting one. I guess I would say I don't feel strongly one way or the other. How about you, Corey? Do you feel one way or the other?
Yeah, to your comment, the Niners are going to be staying out there. But yeah, to your point, this is tough. Barkley, it sounds like Barkley tore his ACL and will be out for the season. I'm not sure the status on Garoppolo. Do either of you know for sure what's going on there?
I heard he might be out for a few weeks. I don't know. I can't remember where I saw or heard that now, but I thought I read something.
So I saw Mullins got some run, so I'd really have to look back on. I think he got quite a bit of run 2 years ago as well. Was that right? Also, yeah. So really have to look at that. This Giants defense, I don't think it's too great, and then as well as that offense, I've been very impressed with what I've seen from Daniel Jones so far. To be honest, I know it's maybe not showed up completely on the offensive side of the ball, but I think he's been making some pretty good plays. Again, he's struggling with, injuries around him, not a very good line. And he played a very good defense at Pittsburgh week 1. And above average defense in Chicago in week 2. So, this is another good defense in the Niners. Again, the Niners are beat up a little defensively, but they're still just a good cultural coached defense. And I don't know if I can really, it would be hard for me to, I think, lay the points with the Niners or even take the points with the Giants at this point.
Yeah, it's super tough. I agree with you. I think Daniel Jones has been playing well, but the thing is, just same thing as last year. Turnovers is what hurting him.
Right.
Well, to add real quick, I just put money on Giants plus 4.5, and then it just moved down to 4. So I don't know. I didn't put that much money on it, but it did instantly move. Like literally, I put it on while you guys were talking, and now it's moved to 4.
I guess you do have a lean.
Just saying. I have a strong lean because I think trying to fade the Niners when they were playing the Jets is just dumb in and of itself, because the Jets are a complete shit show in every sense of the word, right? Just to point out, the defining moment of the Jets organization was, I believe it was 3rd and 35, and 49ers ran it up the middle and got 55 yards. So just as what we're dealing with their third string running back, technically, though Jerick McKinnon is really, he could start for some teams. What's concerning with me on this is, you want to talk about cluster injuries. 2 defensive linemen, still going to be out. Their cornerbacks, Garoppolo, if he's not playing, Kittle might be back, maybe not. Jordan Reed played well in his absence. He's still solid when he's healthy. They don't have their receivers. There's just so many. You're really playing a second string team. At some point. And yes, 49ers have a great organization, great head coach, but in this spot, they're staying across country. There's no time to even game plan. Like, everything is just like, we gotta stabilize the boat from sinking. We just got to get you up to speed, you up to speed, and you up to speed. Oh, and you up to speed, and you up to speed, because all you fuckers are starting. Excuse my language. You know what I'm saying? To me, and especially on the road, there's no time to even really have a sophisticated game plan. So you're going to have, in my opinion, vanilla as vanilla can be. So if the Giants just play decently, and I think losing Saquon Barkley might be a closeted good thing. And I think we saw this last year when he was out. It opens up the game plan so we don't have to force feed the most talented player. And that is to the benefit of Danny Dimes. So there's a lot here for me to like the Giants, and the Giants are not the Jets. So just that in and of itself makes me think I was a week early trying to fade the Niners slam dunk. They're going to win no matter who's on the field versus the Jets. And they're playing the same stadium, I believe, which the turf is what apparently caused a lot of injuries on both sides of the ball. So are the Niners going to lose more players? I don't know. So just a lot of variables that to me go against the Niners here.
Yeah, I can see that. And I totally agree with you. Once Barkley went out, because that was one of the games I was actually watching the most closely, just being a Bears fan and things. And when Barkley went out, I actually bet the Giants, plus 14.5. And I bet them again, plus 17.5 live, just because I knew, later on in that game that, exactly to your point, Zach, was they were going to stop force feeding and feeling the pressure to feed Barkley, which wasn't working to their benefit. The Bears were stuffing the run, and they were and the Steelers were stuffing the run last week as well. And just let Danny Dimes throw the ball, do the quick routes. That can serve at these quick slant plays that can serve as your running game. And when they did that, that's when the Giants really did start moving the ball. And they have Deion Lewis as a backup, and he's like a really great back that you can still have him in the backfield, but then toss these passes out to him. He's such a good pass catcher. So I think it's not even that big of a downgrade. Maybe even to your point, Zach, an upgrade. My biggest concern would be that the Bears got a lot of running room on the Giants defense. Montgomery was just running through massive holes. So if that is going to be a continued issue, and the Steelers also ran over the Giants as well. So yikes, that could
that was the Giants' Achilles heel last year. So it seems like that's going to probably continue.
Yeah.
That's a good point, though.
Next game, we got the Tennessee Titans at the Minnesota Vikings.
Wow. I'll say pick.
Tennessee by 1.5.
Yeah, obviously the Vikings have not put in great performances at all. And the Titans have squeaked by twice. Funny enough, with what's his name hitting 2 game-winning field goals, essentially, who really screwed us last week after having missed 4 field goals. I don't know.
How do you take the Vikings in this spot? Because to your point, Brett, and I agree with it, is we haven't seen anything from the Vikings. So it's kind of like the whole Jets theory. Obviously, the Jets on heroin, but how do you bet the Jets when there's nothing showing us that they're competent, right? This is what happened with Miami last year. There was no way you could bet Miami week 1, week 2, until like week 3 when they had a good half versus Dallas, and then week 4, like until they actually showed that they could put a game together and like stay in it and have a chance. Like, there's no way you could lay even the 17 points in the first few weeks of the season. Like, you're just getting cute. So I wonder with the Vikings, like, we know they have Kirk Cousins who's capable. We know they have Mike Zimmer. But with, the injuries, I think Barr went out with an injury. He might be out. That's something to monitor. At what point can you even really buy this team, especially if it's a pick 'em? Like, I don't know. It just seems like it's either Tennessee or bust.
Yeah, I make this game closer to a pick 'em, I think. So, I mean, initially, maybe want to lean towards the Vikings. But, I mean, that 1.5, how valuable is that really? I don't know. We're looking at the Vikings at 0-2, the Titans at 2-0. So, I mean, part of that makes me maybe want to like the Vikings a little bit more. But I think to your point, like, what have they showed us? It's really hard to back a team, I think, when we were so down on them. And then they've confirmed that bias 2 straight weeks. And I still don't know if the market's caught up to how low we view them. Because, I mean, the market definitely didn't view them how they should versus the Packers week 1 or the Colts.
It's a very good point, Corey, by the way.
Yeah, they missed I think they're against the spread margin is almost -14. I mean, both those games. So I think just that alone, it's hard for me to really take either side. I want to lean towards the Vikings, but just to your guys' points, it's a spot where you really can't take them, I still don't think, until they show something.
And you're not, and to be fair, and though you may not get the points in the spot, but you're not even getting any margin of error. So if the Vikings did a decent showing, they finally put it together. I mean, they basically have to win the game straight up. So I mean, you're basically betting Game 3 is the game the Vikings are going to put it together versus a playoff caliber team and win the game.
Yeah.
Who's going to make that bet? That's not a 50-50 bet. That's a 40-45% bet. So I just no way to take Vikings.
What we would talk about too, like getting cute, and just to my point earlier in the podcast is when you see a bad team playing badly, it doesn't mean you can't bet them throughout the whole season, because there eventually is going to be a mispricing. I don't think the market's downgraded the Vikings enough yet here if it's only 1.5. If it was 3.5, okay, now maybe the market's moved a little bit too much. But I don't know if the market's caught up to how bad the Vikings are yet. And to your point, maybe the Vikings do win this. Great. Okay, great. So there it is. There is the flash that we needed to see to know that the Vikings can be bet on. It doesn't change our macro view, but right now, why try to try to pick the bottom here? That's just how you get your face ripped off, like the Jets did this week. Next.
Washington football team at the Cleveland Browns.
I'll say Browns -6.5.
You're spot on, 6.5.
Oh, I was thinking it was probably similar to the Bengals, maybe with a minor downgrade to the Washington football team after their performance this week. This is a tough one. I mean, the Browns defense has serious problems. I don't think the Bengals offense is as good as we saw on Thursday night. I don't think they're the 1999 Rams. I just think the Browns defense is just decimated. And if that's the case, and the Browns are also turnover prone, I'd probably lean Washington here. And like we mentioned earlier, the 10 days rest for the Browns, I don't care. If anything, after that performance versus the Bengals, they probably want to get out there and start playing as soon as possible. I mean, I don't love Washington, but I would lean at Washington probably at this point.
Yeah. So, good, Corey. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think I have a couple takes on this game. I've said it before, getting close to a touchdown with Washington, I think that's a spot where I'll want to bet on Washington a lot during this season. Week 2 is different with Kyler Murray being able to run. I said he was going to really neutralize Washington's greatest strength on defense. Now, a lot of people want to believe Baker can run, but I think the thing that's different with Baker is I'm pretty sure his splits when he throws on the run is a lot worse than when he stays in the pocket. So I think with that, I'm not sure that he really neutralizes anything there. So, I mean, if I were just to look at this number and see Washington plus 6.5 at Cleveland, I would have a very strong lean on Washington. But I think two things that maybe will hold me back a little bit, just situationally, and I'm not sure how strong I should be weighing these, but I'll have to look into it more. The Browns are coming off a Thursday night game, so that's important. They get an extra 3 days of prep and rest, and maybe they recover some of those guys on injury. And then we also see Washington on back-to-back road trip. So there's that two things that are negative for Washington.
Yeah, and real quick, Corey, that's a good point. I think the difference between the Thursday night games going into this week, into next week, is does the extra time actually get some guys healthy for the Browns? Because as we see with buys, typically, when you have a bye when your team's hot, typically when they come back, they kind of crap the bed. But if the team was injured and they're playing poorly going into the bye, when they come out kind of like the Falcons every year, they're like rejuvenated, have their defense figured out, and they're off and running and finish the season strong. So I wonder if this actually is to the benefit of the Browns because of just kind of getting players back healthy on defense potentially. So if they have a few of their key guys back, especially in the secondary, not that Washington can do a whole lot besides TJ McLaurin or Terry McLaurin. So, just something to monitor, I think, is a little different than this past week's Thursday games.
Okay, so I think, Corey, we have like 9 games left, so let's move on to the next one.
Next game, Cincinnati Bengals at Philadelphia Eagles.
I wouldn't be – I'm a little bit more impressed with the Bengals. You said it's at Philly?
Correct.
I'll say Philly -3.
So this is a little bit of a head scratcher for me. The look ahead on this game before the games were played on Sunday, on Sunday, was Philly -6, but it is now opened back up at 6.5, and it's moving towards 7, actually.
Wow. I'll have to definitely take a closer look at these injuries, but that seems like too much given the way the Eagles have been playing. But you don't want to bet on the Eagles at their lowest, lose, and then bet against them, and then they rip your face off. So I'll have to think about this one.
I would say, though, real quick, I think Bengals, really obviously struggle on defense and stopping the run. The Eagles, we have seen flashes in spurts, and obviously that first half, and Carson Wentz throwing 2 picks again. So there's things that like really are manageable for the Eagles here. And remember, the Bengals were really, they were down 14 points almost the whole game versus the Browns, one way or another, and kind of backdoored that game. So, I just, to me, it's Eagles or bust. Even if the line's under 7, I think it's
a lot of points. I feel like I probably would just stay away at this point.
Yeah, I can't say I have too strong of a lean. I'll have to see. I didn't see any of the Thursday night game, actually, so I'm going to have to watch that. I've heard Joe Burrow's looked pretty good, actually, in week 2 in comparison to maybe week 1, and he was making some plays. But, again, the Eagles were a team that I was high on in week 2, high on in week 1 as well. Just in the general for overall view. So it's hard for me not to maybe look towards the Eagles here, but I think I would lean towards staying away as well.
The thing is I feel like, the Eagles have put in 2 questionable performances, and you're not even getting the benefit of the doubt at -6.5, -7. It's like basically the market hasn't downgraded them yet. So it's like,
to be fair, game, I did hear that the look ahead at the start of the season for this game was Philly -10 to -12 in that range. Surprisingly, but that seems very steep, but
there's definitely upgrade of Bengals, that's for sure. Because they do not look like a 2-14 team. So, next.
We're looking at the Bears at the Falcons.
I'll say Falcons -3.5.
Falcons minus.
Falcons -3. I think Corey cut out for a second.
I'll lean Falcons.
Yeah. What do you think, Corey? Do you have a?
I think I'm just looking at my power ratings right now. Those definitely lean towards the Bears. I have Falcons -1 power rated. But past that, I don't know. I think I still might lean towards the Bears. I don't know how good this Falcons defense is. And I think the Bears, and when they maybe can get a defense that is just, terrible. And this Falcons defense, what have they done so far? We saw the Cowboys drop 40 on them. We saw the Seahawks score, I think it was close to 35 on them. So that just worries me. And I think this Bears defense is maybe better than what maybe the general perception of them maybe from last season was. So I have to lean towards the Bears here, but it's not a strong lean by any means.
Yeah, real quick, it's just really hard to lay the points at -3 to your point, Corey, because you have a team with a poor defense. Yeah, they're at home, but if the Bears can put any points up, it's just going to be tough. But I could see this as.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Brett.
The Falcons defense, obviously, they played very poorly, but they've at least played two great offenses. Seattle looks amazing on offense. Russell Wilson's got 4 touchdowns in 3.5 quarters. And the Cowboys were one of the number 1 rated offenses last year. Now they're going to be playing the Bears. They scored 17 points on the Giants defense, and they're one of the worst defenses as well. And they were essentially 1 play away from losing that game straight up with the Giants in the red zone at the end of the game.
Real quick,
the Bears should be 0-2.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask is what's this line if Bears are 0-2 and Falcons beat Dallas like they should have?
Yeah, great points.
Still 3, or does it go to 4?
I think it definitely gets to 4 then.
I have not seen anything to buy on the Bears at this point in time.
Uh-huh.
And now there's definitely things worth selling on the Falcons. The thing is, I just don't want their defense obviously clearly has issues, but again, they haven't given up 40 to a team like the Bears offense yet, and maybe they do. But hey, I would love it if the market buys the Bears and this can bleed under a field goal, then I would definitely like the Falcons. So yeah, let's move on.
Next game, New York Jets at the Indianapolis Colts.
I'll say Colts -7.5.
So this one is -9.5.
Oh wow. Jets are unbettable at this point, so that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, net on this game going into the game was the Colts -6.5 going into their Sunday games. So they net upgrade, downgrade between the Colts and Jets were 3 points. So I don't know. At that 6.5, I was very tempted to bet that prior to the week, but I don't know. At 9.5, it's getting rather steep. But right away say I just don't think you can back the Jets at this point. They're showing signs to be like the Dolphins maybe early on last year, where they're just out of it. There's just no real identity, no real drive, motivation. So I think you can only look to the Colts here, but I'm still not sure if that's the way to go.
Yeah, and real quick, the difference between last year and this year, I think, is, the Jets have, I think, what the team knows is a kind of like a sitting, a dead duck head coach, whereas last year there was kind of we want to get this new coach an opportunity and figure out a way to give it our best. I wouldn't be surprised if this whole team just, kind of collapses throughout the season and just doesn't care anymore.
Yeah, and Gase is a dead man walking. So I think until they
get
him out of there, it's just going to continue to be negative energy. They don't want to play for him. They don't want to risk their careers for him. So,
right. Next game, we're looking at the Panthers at the Chargers.
Chargers put in a much better performance here on defense and offense. Obviously, with the Justin Herbert curveball now being the starting quarterback, we'll see. It's hard to. I guess I don't really know exactly what happened to Taylor. I know you said he had chest pains, whatever. But after that type of performance from Herbert, how can you ever take him out now, even if Tyrod Taylor is healthy? Seems like he could have just lost his job permanently. I don't see how you can go back.
Well, Anthony Lynn did say, he said Tyrod Taylor is the quarterback if he's 100% healthy, which I think is a clue in of, we're going to say he's not 100%.
He's only like 90
Cop up.
healthy.
Yeah. He's not quite there yet, guys. So I think you're going to see Herbert. There's no reason not to, and especially playing the Panthers. This is the exact kind of game you want a young rookie quarterback in, because Panthers defense is not very good. So,
yeah, I would say Chargers -4.5.
So this line, I think, due to the uncertainty at quarterback, this is a Saturday line that I have. There's no line posted right now from what I could see. Is Chargers -6. So I think your -4.5 could be very close, because I still think as Herbert performed, I think they probably would still be downgraded in the market. I think watching the Chargers play the Chiefs today, he put up a lot of yards, but I really wasn't that impressed with him. I mean, there was a lot of stuff underneath. The run game really carried him. The Chargers just felt like they were getting, 6 chunk yards almost every single play when they ran the ball. So I think it really opened up things for Herbert. So, to his benefit, that's not going to change maybe as the season goes. The Chiefs don't have the greatest run defense, but on top of that, I can't say I was that impressed with Herbert. So maybe some people that just stat watch will be a lot more impressed, but I'm still not sold on that. And he was one of the number one quarterbacks, I think, a rookie quarterback that we talked about possibly wanting to fade if we saw them get in. Coming from the Oregon offense, not playing under center. And especially if what's true here, that Tyrod Taylor was expected to play all the way up until Sunday. If that really is true, then, this will be that was pretty impressive then, that he played maybe as well as he did on really maybe very limited first team snaps over the course of the week. So this week could be a lot different, but I'm still not completely sold on it. So, I'd lean towards the Panthers if it's at 6, but I will have to see where that line comes out.
Yeah, and you also had a Chiefs defense that was totally unprepared for this type of quarterback play, quarterback style, especially too. Right. Next game.
Yeah, so this is an interesting game. 2 teams that I think several of us are bullish on. We got the Lions at the Cardinals.
I'm going to say Cards -4.5.
So this one is Cardinals -6. And the Saturday look ahead was actually -3.5. So there's been 2.5 points of movement after the games.
That's a massive upgrade. So they're pricing the Lions like the Washington football team prior to this week. So.
Right. And I think this line's actually moving towards 6.5. And I think a lot of this is just maybe the matchup. If Detroit's going to still have those cluster injuries at corner and not be able to stop the passing game, I think the Cardinals, we saw it even last year, I think. And I'm not going to compare a matchup last year to entirely this year, but when the Cardinals really started spreading their offense versus Detroit in week 1 last year, they came back. I think it was something maybe almost down 21 in the early 4th or late 3rd. So this is I think a schematic maybe matchup where the Cardinals will be able to maybe just really kind of do whatever they want on this Detroit defense, especially if they have those cluster injuries. I agree with you. The 6 seems very, very steep at first glance, but I don't want to overreact to it too much, just with how this Arizona offense has looked early on in the season.
Yep.
Yeah, and to add to that real quick, Corey, I think as far as expectations, we really have to kind of like rip the name off the team and the preseason expectations when these injuries kind of expose what these teams now are. And I think if the Lions have a continuation of the injuries that they've had the last week and a half, there's no way you can do the Lions in this spot, because the same result's going to happen. They're going to give up 30 points, and then you're basically betting, will Stafford keep them in the game and or backdoor cover? And that's a losing bet over a long period of time, because there's no other outs, So, if they get some health back, if Galladay's back and the corner's back, I think maybe +6 could be a nice opportunity. But if those guys are all out again, there's no way that playing the Lions makes any sense in the spot.
Yeah, that seems to make
because
sense.
It's not the Lions from the macro standpoint. It's now the second string Cubs. Like, it's not you can't have the same handicap from what you had 2.5 weeks ago. It's just a different team.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the market adjusts that quickly with cluster type injuries. Sorry.
Yeah. So should we take a look at the next game?
Yeah, let's do it.
We're looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Denver Broncos.
Tampa Bay.
Wow. I guess it looks like Drew Lock might be out, although Driscoll looked like
Florida.
More than a sufficient compliment. Yeah, and go Gators. And Driscoll played decently even last year for the Lions until he then got hurt, and then David Blau came in. So I don't know. I don't think Driscoll's actually that big of a downgrade. I gotta watch the Bucks Panthers. I mean, it sounds like Zach, you were impressed by the Bucks. Just watching the box score, I was like, wow, like why aren't they winning by more? Like, why isn't this game already? Why is it 21-14?
Well,
so I got to take a look.
Yeah. Well, I think for the Bucks, like I've said from the very beginning, is this team's going to take time to get acclimated just because they have so many new pieces. Like Leonard Fournette had 100 yards rushing. He's been with the team 10 days. It's going to take time to gel. Brady threw a pick off a miscommunication with Gronk. Wide open touchdown to Scotty Miller. He drops it. They're a little banged up, but also, I think just the rhythm aspect is just going to take this team a few weeks to kind of get situated.
Well, if that's the case, then the Broncos could be bet on here because I feel like they put in two pretty decent performances versus two, good teams like the Titans and the Steelers. So I'm going to say, it's probably Bucks -3. But, if that is the case, the Broncos look really attractive.
Well, you're going to think this is very attractive thing. And I agree with you here. The Broncos +6 actually in this game.
Wow.
So
at home.
I want a little bit right off the bat. Just looking at it, I think it's just they're downgrading from Locke to Driscoll, maybe a little bit too much. We look at the look ahead on this line from Saturday night, and it was Broncos +3.5. And even at that number, I was looking at it and I was tempted to bet it at that time. Now we're looking at +6, and I think it's just an overreaction from Locke to Driscoll. A lot of that coming from a lot of MVP love for Locke to start the season. So I think a lot of that, from my preseason work, I have Locke to Driscoll as about a 1-point downgrade. So I really don't see much of a change there. All three of us, I believe, weren't very high on Locke coming into the year. None of us were buying any of that hype, and none of us were selling out on any of that. So I definitely agree with you that the Broncos at +6 looks like a strong buy.
Yeah, and the Broncos are 2-0 against ATS. That definitely looks attractive, especially if the market wants to sell the Broncos and buy the Bucks, and this can get closer even to a touchdown. 'Cause it's in Denver, you said?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, that's wild.
I'm gonna dissent real quick, and the reason is, and excuse me if I'm a homer with the Bucks, but Denver had two fluky covers. The first one, obviously, 5 missed field goals. Tennessee really could have run away with that game pretty easily if anything kind of goes their way. And in regards to this week, Broncos really were getting dominated by the Steelers most of the game. Driscoll comes in, and I think that changes kind of, like we saw with Herbert, is sometimes if the quarterback's competent, if they're decent, it changes actually the pressure on the defense. The defense doesn't necessarily know how to, the entire game plan of the defense almost goes out the window. So now they're just reacting to a guy. It's almost like when you're playing poker with a novice, right? Like you're just I don't know what you're going to do. So I just got to now I'm out of my game because I don't know what you're going to do because you don't know what you're doing. So sometimes I think it's actually an advantage for the new upstart quarterback kind of getting a fresh start. So I don't know. If it's under a touchdown, Broncos should not have covered their last 2 games, even though they did.
But I feel
And
like they're
all the
being
injuries
priced.
with the Broncos.
I think they're being priced like they haven't.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm gonna have to do a little more research, but I feel like it's a trap game of.
But I'm just saying, even
6
to your
points
point,
at home.
maybe you're right. But
Here's one thing I would
you're
say.
talking about the Bucks are all out of sorts, and it's going to take them a couple games. And
Well, but
if
they'll get improved as those weeks kind of come to pass. I'm just saying this past like every week is a little less clunky, but they'll still be a little clunk. Excuse me, along the way.
Yeah, and if we look at flipping this game and home field advantage isn't worth a whole lot this year, if any, depending on who you are. But I would maybe put it at 1.5 roughly. So if we flip this 3 points, we're looking at Tampa Bay -9 at home versus the Broncos. And I mean, we're looking at a very similar line to what we just had versus the Panthers. And I still think the Broncos are definitely a better team than the Panthers. I know you can't just compare it like that, but that's just one way I would look at this game.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Next game, we're looking at the Cowboys at the Seahawks.
Seahawks looks like they put in a good performance tonight so far, at least. I'll say Seahawks -4.
Seahawks -3. But to your point, I think with how Dallas performed today and as well as how Seattle's performing right now, I'm guessing this will open up higher than -3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd lean Seattle.
Yeah. Seattle, if Russ is playing the way he's playing, I don't know how you can go against him if it's under a touchdown.
The Cowboys defense, the way it's playing now too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you got to put Russ on 30 to 40 points just for that reason alone.
Yeah, one thing, I brought this up to, I think, someone else this week. I lean towards the Patriots, actually, versus Seattle. I never ended up having any action on either side, but I lean towards the Patriots at +4 versus Seattle. But I ultimately came to the conclusion I can't be betting against Seattle early on in the season with their change of game style. I still don't feel like I know how aggressive they might be with Russell Wilson from a game in, game out basis. We saw in week 1 they were very aggressive on a neutral play calling basis in terms of pass first run. So I think with that alone, the Seattle team could perform a lot better than what we maybe seen in years past with letting Russ cook. So I think just with that, it's a spot where I can't bet against Seattle. I could only take Seattle in this spot.
Well, and real quick, as this game kind of winds down, is, I think Russ threw a pick 6. So if you take that off the board, Seattle's winning, with 5 minutes left and the ball driving. They're up 12 points. So just kind of food for thought as we look ahead to next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, great points. We'll look at the Packers at the Saints Sunday night.
I'll say Saints. I mean, I'm sure the market's really upgrading the Packers as well, and we still have to see the Saints play. But I'll say Saints -3.5. No, it's not just say Saints -3.
Saints -4.
Oh. I don't know. I don't know if I want to buy into the Packers hype yet. So.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well, Brett. And I think just from a matchup basis, I just don't think this is a great matchup for the Packers. We saw last year they struggled a lot with stronger defensive lines. I think that was in part to Rodgers, in part with the offensive line. They already lost one of their starting offensive linemen. They faced 2 pretty poor pass rushes in Detroit and the Vikings, probably 2 of the worst bottom 10 at this point pass rushes, whereas they'll see the Saints a much better defensive line. And I think it's just a hard spot. I make the number out to 4 as well, so I really have no strong lean right now.
Yeah, and you said it was Saints -4 or Packers?
Correct.
Yeah,
Saints
-4. Yeah, it's tough to lay the points, but strictly from a matchup point, like you said, Corey, I think, if you're going to obviously do kind of straight up, it's kind of Saints. Obviously, they're favored, but Packers were down 14-3 in the first quarter to the Lions. They was 8-7 versus the Vikings in the first half. So they've really come on kind of late, and Devontae Adams has a hamstring pull. So if that continues over to the next week, I mean, you're really running out of options for Aaron Rodgers to throw to. So I think it could be a similar kind of game that we saw when Brady went up against the Saints. So just kind of keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
Right. And the last game of the week, a game that will probably be bet on a ton, and it's two of the best teams in the NFL. We got the Chiefs at the Ravens.
Wow. I mean, I can't see. It's got to be Ravens -3.
Spot on.
Yeah. I mean, wow.
Oh, I realize part of the stupid reason to back the Chiefs in hindsight should have been more diligent here is the look ahead to the Ravens. I mean, Chiefs were playing the Chargers, going to LA. Let's be honest. They thought they would win going away. They don't care about that game. What they care about is the only team in the AFC, besides maybe the Steelers, probably not the Colts anymore, is the Baltimore Ravens. So I'm sure there was extra attention, whether intentionally or unintentionally, being paid to this game.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, really got to look at, I guess, some of the injuries on the Chiefs side. I think, like we've talked about ad nauseum, injuries. So that's something we're going to have to really look at. I feel like, from my current understanding, is the Ravens are one of the healthier teams in the NFL right now. And I think, I know the Chiefs lost Sammy Watkins mid-game. And I think they lost at least a linebacker or two during the game as well. So I think, that's something we'll have to take a look at. And if the Chiefs are beat up and the Ravens are healthy, I mean, this is really tough. I'd probably have to lean Ravens. Just because the Chiefs are not healthy.
I'm in agreement with you, Brett. I think just watching how the Chiefs kind of really ran all over by the Chargers, and we know that's the Ravens' strength is the run game, the run option. I don't know. It's a tough spot to try to lay the 3, I think, with the Ravens when you're going up against Mahomes. Like, whenever you're catching points with Mahomes, it seems like it's a spot where you'd want to be betting him. But it's an early season spot, and with the injuries, I think I'd lean towards the Ravens. I'd maybe also lean to the over just at first glance. That's at 52.5. I think the Ravens are going to be able to move the ball pretty well. And I mean, the Chiefs could have 7 points at halftime, and I think they can put up the points in the second half. Sounds square, but at the same time, I think this is a game that you see both teams maybe eclipsing 30 points.
Yeah, well, the Niners was super square this week, and it won pretty easily. Squares do win. But yeah, I think this is
just 40% of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, real quick, I want to add one thing on this game is, if we remember back to week 1, Texans, vaunted David Johnson, kind of had his way also with Casey's defense. So if that's the case, I think the probably sharpest guarantee in this game is Ravens are going to be able to run the ball. And that doesn't bode well for keeping Patrick Mahomes off the field, and as well as obviously driving on the field and getting scores. So, yeah,
if the Chiefs are banged up at wide receiver and on defense, especially a linebacker, that's going to really hurt them in this kind of matchup, and even for the season if they continue to be hurt in this type of way, because then it's just going to turn back into, the Mahomes needs to outscore the other opponent, and it comes like a time of possession game type game, and the Ravens can also hold the ball for a long time. So it's almost like I'm actually looking at this game, not to say that the over can't happen, but it's like the Ravens defense is much better than the Chiefs defense, and I think that's where the biggest edge is to be had, and why they probably could cover a 3.
Right.
All right. Good stuff. So we covered a lot of ground there. Again, just to recap, Course Portfolio go 3-2 in week 1, 3-2 in week 2. So we're up approximately 2% heading into week 3. So really pumped about that. Both Corey's article and Zach's article, both net positive on a P&L basis. Both weeks 1 and weeks 2 continue to really outperform the broader market. So definitely check out those next week. And with that, we'll be signing off. And that's the closing bell. See you next week, guys.